11.1 is dropping soon with some lingering worries. Meanwhile, the WoW team shared some plans for the future, including some pretty wild details about player housing. Hey, it's Soul, this is Warcraft Weekly, and we're here, and housing is all the way back there. It's already been a very long year, but we'll get through it together, I promise. Anyway, hit that like button to support the channel, subscribe for more WoW coverage, and catch me live where I'm streaming. The next patch of WoW is coming soon, complete with new season and the usual round of creator coverage that's just starting to roll in. Just recently, I went over how the experience could be like for new or returning players who have no idea what they're doing, and maybe they just ran straight into Undermine. I also covered all the new activities that'll take up our day-to-day, but I want to highlight a few concerns or red flags that have a good chance of getting a lot of attention in a not so great way. One being professions. There's some good news though, in that we're going to get an opportunity to do a one-time respec for our War Within professions. It's pretty straightforward, there's no requirements or hoops to jump through, you just do it if you want to fix your spec or you save it for later, it's all good. But outside of the respec and the most minimal of updates like Vantis runes and reputation contracts for inscription, that's pretty much it. There's nothing new to gather, there's no new recipes really. Considering the Undermine and goblins, this could have been a great opportunity for goblin engineers, right? This isn't exactly bad. In fact, I predict gear crafting is going to feel a bit of a boon because crest income from delves, that's going to go up. They're going to have much better access to runed and even gilded crest to use for higher level crafts. Mythic Plus World might see a small uptick too with more accessible gilded, but with caps on crafting sparks and crest, don't expect a huge explosion of business either. An important update just came after my original recording. A new PTR build dropped, which is at last a release candidate, and addresses one of the issues I wanted to talk about today. A renowned raid track is being included for the Liberation of Undermine raid, and until now included 2 tokens that could be traded in for gear from the raid. As of this new build, these tokens have been removed from the renowned track, but in a statement from Blizzard, they're not really gone, they're just being moved elsewhere. Earlier, I talked about how these tokens were a little bit problematic with their placement because they would take a really long time to acquire, like towards the end of this upcoming season, making them feel really unsatisfying. My hopes are that these tokens will end up being available a little bit sooner, like maybe one after the story mode raid difficulty is available, and another a bit closer to the mid-season. With this change now in play, I'm feeling pretty good going into Season 2 outside of what might be an unexciting time for crafters, and hey, who knows what might still change before the patch goes live. We'll get to the player housing commentary in a bit, but I don't want that to overshadow a few statements from Holly Longdale, the big boss of World of Warcraft. She pointed out the huge amount of support for the Cure Duchenne organization with $2 million in pet sales going towards them. She re-upped Blizzard's commitment towards the classic era of games with more to come. Of course, there's the player housing and the dedicated team working on that, and further improvements to the user interface and experience. There are 2 big topics that caught my attention, one being them looking to improve on the new player experience. The last time that was done was with Shadowlands, which introduced Exile's Reach and Chromie Time. As she said, we know the experience can be better and are looking towards new improvements to the feature to streamline the experience in the near term and expand upon what it can be in the future. We may expect some changes to happen in this expansion and more during Midnight and Last Titan, while also making clear this will be a long-term, ongoing journey as the game evolves and changes with each expansion. The wording's pretty clear that whatever they're planning, it's not going to be done in one stroke, which is exactly what happened with the likes of Exile's Reach and Chromie Time. As for what they'll do, well, of course, that's anyone's guess. A lot of ideas come to mind, and the team has some new tools to play with. I'm talking about things like maybe using follower dungeons and story mode raids and lessons learned with scaling and phasing and more. How do we compress, though? How do we compress 20 years worth of World of Warcraft into a meaningful but not too overwhelming new player experience? I don't know, dude. All I gotta say to that for now is good luck. The other big topic, community. She called it a social initiative. She clarified this with a few examples like rewards for positive behavior, making it easier to connect with like-minded players, role-playing, and more. And she mentioned helping build connections for grouping using external social platforms we typically use. Now, I don't know about you, but I can definitely see an integration between World of Warcraft and AOL Instant Messenger. If World of Warcraft were to integrate with the likes of Discord, that would be huge. It would mean that some of the larger Discord channels dedicated to grouping, they could be used as like this giant filter for the current pre-made group tool. I've mentioned WoW Made Easy for the US and the No Pressure and Dungeon Dojo from the EU, which kind of self-moderate in an effort to bring a more chill vibe to high-end groups. Now this is really cool, and it's also Blizzard waving the white flag. It's their admission of failure in part of WoW communities, which sadly just came way too late in the face of what the internet's capable of, like even those many years ago. WoW players connect outside of World of Warcraft, and now the game hopes to catch up with that, at least that's my impression. The consequence of partnering up with Discord channels includes the possibility of elevating these channels to greater status, but possibly losing some of their autonomy. So I won't be surprised if Blizzard were to say that these Discord channels, that they need to be recognized as an official community Discord. It was a program introduced almost 2 years ago, and as far as I can tell, it only exists in Europe. When it comes to the social side of World of Warcraft, it's a two-way street. I want Blizzard to do better at making effective tools for organizers, raid, and party members to use, but the players need to actually use them too. I hope the devs reach out and do a lot of listening, because whatever they come out with can't just be them catching up to tech that moves super fast. They've got to get ahead of the game and innovate. And there's going to be a consequence if these Discord channels are in fact successful. The pre-made group tool, if you think it's bad now, wait until you see who's left. So we've got to talk about this very, very big post on player housing, because Blizzard dropped some bombs that answered some of our biggest questions, and of course leads us to a flurry of new ones. It was written by Jesse Kurlanchik, the principal designer for Warcraft, who was also the co-founder of Proletariat, which was acquired by Blizzard a few years ago. It kind of gives us the impression that Blizzard Boston is what makes up most of this dedicated player housing team. I already did the read in an earlier video with some reaction level impressions, but now that I've had time to sit down and soak this all in, as well as listen to some of your folks' comments, I've got some of my own takes and questions. His post defined 3 pillars for housing, which took on many of players' biggest concerns. The toolset, as in the actual work into creating our home, should be easy enough for someone with no 3D experience to be comfortable with and use successfully, but it should also be powerful enough that players can surprise us with their creations or drill down to get the tiniest details just right. It certainly sounds like we can freely place items where we want, rotate that table or chair just the way we want to. Final Fantasy XIV, which I'm going to refer to a few times here, boasts some incredible customization options, but some of the crazier designs are things to taking advantage of bugs and glitches that their team just seems fine leaving in. Another pillar, reiterating their commitment that housing is an evergreen feature. It's gonna be supported forever, which is kind of a double-edged sword kind of statement. It's gonna be continually built across patches and expansions. New stuff is always gonna come in, so while some of us will do one setup and be done with it, enthusiasts will always have something to look forward to that may cause them to do a whole redecorating at their whim. The reality though, production on housing is going to be Blizzard fighting on multiple fronts. They're going to need to catch up on 20 years worth of Warcraft and keep up with the new content being laid before them. What Blizzard produces isn't just going to cover the different races and cultures, but expansion-specific stuff as well. Notice how the concept art shows us what they call rugged and folk decor. The data mining from the other week refers to this, confirming the code wasn't just leftover throwaways, and it also refers to these other categories: none, generic, and opulent, which don't necessarily refer to a race, an expansion, or a timeline. Despite what they may attempt though, as we see anything substantial revealed, and this week makes a good example of this, players are going to get mad. Housing is going to be available near the 2 faction capitals, so for the Horde we're going to get something like this. We're going to get a little bit of Durotar, some Ashara, and to the east there's the beach. Meanwhile the Alliance will get an area that covers Elwyn Forest, Duskwood, and Westfall, which, has its own beach too. But hey dude, what about Grizzly Hills, or Ornaran Plains, or Argus? Where do these couple of categories fit for Draenei and Zandalari trolls or undead? And most importantly, does it fit me or you as a player? As more is revealed, there's going to be people who are rightfully seething because their favorite race or zone or kind of decor still hasn't shown up. And unless we want to settle for Blizzard using AI to pump this art out faster, this might mean years of waiting for certain decors. So the team looks focused on getting the most critical parts done, and they're going to have a reasonably wide variety of decor to get us started. Their third pillar is what I find a bit controversial. It's this social pillar. Now, it says in the post, its systems are designed at a fundamental level to encourage interacting, playing, and progressing with friends, neighbors, guilds, and the wider community in a meaningful way. So what could this mean? What would encourage me, or maybe force me, to interact with others? There are two ways I'm looking at this. If the statement refers to how we earn or create these decorations, I think I get it. I noticed the team mentioned housing decors to be earned as in-game rewards and to a lesser extent cash shop purchases, but it stands to reason a big part of housing will involve professions and the player economy to a certain degree. They didn't outright say one way or another there'd be new professions like carpentry or wood chopping or whatever, and to be fair, they didn't talk about how to earn these at all, but I'm gonna take a really big guess here. I suspect they do not want to make housing specific professions because in a way it sort of limits who participates. Like, some people who aren't as interested in housing are going to be like, oh, it's a new profession I have to make room for, or even if it was a secondary, it's another thing to separately level. But on the other hand, if housing components were made and gathered across all the existing professions and later assembled through some like warband NPC before being used or sold, at least that makes a lot of sense in my head. It would get everyone to still participate whether they were actively getting into it or not. It would effectively make housing warband wide by nature too. What I wouldn't like though, in this whole quote, like I wouldn't like it to be something like, hey, Grat, you just started building a new chair in your home. There's a timer on it, and it's going to take 3 days to make this chair, but if your neighbors come visit and help build it by clicking on something, then you'll reduce that time by 2 hours per player. Like folks who remember that old Farmville kind of gameplay, that's not the kind of interaction I'd agree with. On the flip side though, if there was a quest of some sort to volunteer and help clean up other people's yards or houses for like some housing related reward, that would mean both getting that reward and also taking a look at other people's homes to see what players have made. Like, oh, dude, how'd they get that thing? Or, oh my god, a house full of topless gnomes. I think more fundamentally though, just like how lots of people want to have a neighborhood or a community of homes, which is what we're getting, there's a ton of people who want like their far off cabin in the woods away from all of civilization. But it's only a little surprising that's not going to be their initial focus, because remember, this is supposed to be a very long-term thing, so it's less a question of if but when they'll do more isolated housing. My guess is they just had to make a decision. And the article made it pretty clear zones are a lot of work. That includes creating who knows how many different isolated zones to suit the endless hunger of players, while knowing there's only so many kinds of decorations they can produce on top of that. The initial scope, obviously, is probably going to be very narrow. I couldn't help but share a bit of catharsis when it was made very clear housing will be available for everyone, and unlike Final Fantasy XIV, people wouldn't be fighting for plots or have lotteries or lose their house if they didn't stay subbed. My hope is that competition compels improvement and 14 takes some big strides towards, more accessibility. But anyway, back to WoW, this was great news. Like, we're going to have our slice of the world to call our own, and the limits of customization, they're going to explode well beyond our current character and the mount they happen to be sitting on and the title above their name. What's less clear though is just how many homes we can have considering our character limit, and for some, our WoW account limit. We know it's more than one, seeing as how they said we can have a home for both the Horde and Alliance areas, and our warband can freely live in either, but I know I'd be pretty dissatisfied if it really was just the one per zone for the entire warband. So here's what's going on in my headspace. Based on what little we know, I'm going to have one house that's going to be like the warband house, and then the other house, at least if I can get away with it, it's going to be a giant achievement monument. It's not even going to be a trophy room, but a trophy house. And I have this expectation I can visit either of these houses with any of my characters with no friction. And that's just me. An extreme example would be someone who wants homes specific to each one of their 70 some odd characters. I think that's a bit too much, but if a WoW account had a limit of like X number of houses, that would be reasonable. Maybe like 10, I don't know. They also said housing rewards are shared across our warband, which tells me the cores are going to feel like an unlock on the transmog menu as opposed to being a consumable item that needs to be replenished or can be destroyed. So, like if I had a Sylvanas body pillow in one house, I should be able to create that same pillow in another house without needing to actually craft or earn or find another. But what about more repeatable objects like chairs? Like if I want to make the Onyxia chair, do I get unlimited placement of that chair? Or does it come in a set of 4? Or can I make more chairs and then now it's a set of 8? A very important aspect that might not immediately be apparent, but we should probably get into our heads, would be some direct interaction. Like if I lay a bed down, I expect to be able to click on it and see a pretty convincing animation of being in a bed that fits me. The same goes for chairs and stools that I'd want to suit for every race's size and shape. Now that's not a housing thing, but more closely related. It's more like character art and animation, and I just hope they nail that down. And let's touch on neighborhoods, which is getting a lot of buzz. Because again, I was surprised at this one. I expected solo instances instead of neighborhoods, but as I talked about this just earlier, this seems to be the choice the WoW team thinks is the best first move. Not the only move, but the first. And I like that there are both public and private options for neighborhoods coming. We have lots of questions though about how it's going to play out. I can see the public neighborhoods as a big technical challenge because, well, consider this. If 2 people wanted to build in the same location, sure, in public neighborhoods, the game might make 2 zone layers, so both players don't have to fight for it. And this is all assuming, of course, housing plots have like these fixed zoning areas. But this can get out of hand when potentially hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of players have these different location preferences. And odds are pretty good there's going to be a super favorite location that'll decide kind of a minimum number of these housing layers. I'm skipping ahead here, but this might mean we'll see a number, maybe a large number of public zones that are only partially filled or perhaps almost empty because the game is going to first focus on creating full neighborhoods, followed by a lot of these fragmented neighborhoods based on who's claiming what like housing zone, and it'll dynamically change as people relocate homes too. Like it's going to be weird for a bit while we move wherever we like and the servers are just trying to not melt. I do have a prediction though. Like they're saying there's going to be 50 plots or zoning areas for housing, but does that necessarily mean only 50 players per neighborhood? Like what if a neighborhood was made up of say 250 players? The way that would work would be like I would just be outside my own house, for example, and with a menu selection somewhere, I can tell the game to show me up to 4 other players' houses who happen to be built on top of my location, and now I can look at and visit their house. Or of course I can go to another lot in my neighborhood and then use the menu to view the house that I want to see on a regular basis, unless they move away, of course. I think that would help a lot to mitigate having to make so many layers to suit the most popular housing locations, and of course keeping these public neighborhoods looking full. It's basically sharding, but for houses. But private neighborhoods are a different story. Like, we've seen our share of HOA jokes, but how would private neighborhoods really work in practice? The first thing I would wonder actually would be like how many people would make a private neighborhood and invite nobody? Like, hey, this is my zone, woohoo! Like, you know, it worked for garrisons where everyone was at 1 or 2 locations, so the technology is certainly there. I want to think that, like my speculation with public neighborhoods, private neighborhoods won't be as limited to as many players as there are zoning locations. It would create some nasty bit of friction if like 2 people in our friend circle or guild that they want the same location, and then the neighborhood housing master has to mediate. At the same time, we're crossing into the social game of World of Warcraft, and it'll be interesting to see what sorts of rules people make for themselves, like, okay, cool, the prime location goes to the highest bidder, or the top DPS, or the one that you have a crush on, but she's still with Jake, your nemesis, and you're like, hey, that's cool, but you're secretly playing the waiting game, subtly pointing out whenever Jake the jerk says something rude during keys, or whenever Jake that bitch gives little winky emotes to that Instagram model that he tells her, oh, it's just a parasocial relationship, but it's not, because Jake the jackass is also telling his friend he's actually talking with her, and he tells you this, and you're just waiting for the screenshots to prove it. The house is just that foot in the door. Real talk though, I think the happiness level of private neighborhoods hinges on whether multiple players can inhabit the same space with phasing and menus to manage it. Because it doesn't matter if there's like 50 or 5,000 plots, all you need are 2 stubborn people who want the same spot, and you kind of sort of like them both. We can either let this social problem have a social solution, Jake, or give the game a method for people to make nice with each other. What we got this week was important, but it came with a lot of caveats. Anything can change between now and the end of the year, and just the same, just because a certain something wasn't mentioned this week, it doesn't mean it's not happening. But again, there are lots of lingering questions. I brought up a bunch already, like how will we acquire all these housing items, how professions will or won't be involved, and how many houses can we actually have on the account? How customizable will the actual housing layouts be? Will we have 100% prefabricated homes, or is there some flexibility with hallways and connectors? When will we get access to housing, like level 10 or 20 or the current max level? Will the homes themselves have a 1-to-1 ratio or be kind of sort of instanced? Like, is it going to be a lot bigger inside than outside? And are there other things our house will be able to do? Like, there's a big distinction between traditional player housing and the resource activity system that was garrisons. But I'm talking about things we enjoy in World of Warcraft that might feel a little bit different in our World of Warcraft home. Like, for example, should transmog? Should that be free at home? If we can make crafting stations, should we be able to access public and patron orders? Or how about trade chat accessibility? Will that be a thing? Or, basically, can the house replace being in the city? If we're up to a vote, I would say no, but hey, who knows where we're gonna land? Can I make a special home-cooked feast any of my characters can always go back to for a food buff? Can hunter pets across my warband show up and hang out alongside my battle pets? If we log out in our home, should our gear slowly repair automatically as if simulating our character doing things without us directly controlling them? And will our house be a part of World of Warcraft canon? And by that I mean, should visiting our home be part of a main story campaign? Will NPCs show up and give me quests to go into dungeons, delves, or raids? Unless I don't show up, will I miss those things? We shouldn't stop asking questions or stop the debate on whether these should be things, and I know we should kind of tamp down on the details while focusing on the bigger swings, these pillars that'll define housing for years to come. It's hard to not be excited, and for those of you still wondering why people want housing so much, which makes it surprising you even got this far, I would like to think these folks are coming at it in good faith, so feel free to ask, but very important, please listen too. Look at the responses. To me, housing is a new thing to work towards, because for the past 20 years, we've been playing for the glory of beating up dragons and bad guys and getting gear and pets and mounts and titles and transmog and achievements, and soon we'll be able to take our efforts from the past and the upcoming future to express ourselves on a canvas far beyond just a screenshot of our character or the achievement score number or the percentage on that one website. Soon I'll be able to share the depths of my depravity and give a visual tour of my experiences, and there are countless other reasons folks are more excited about this over any other feature. For now though, that's the show. Let's do the usual thing and thank our very awesome folks who are joining me on the live streams, to our beloved patrons, the first-time viewers, the regulars, and to you. You made it to the end and fed the algorithm. So if you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe for more WoW courage, catch me live, and I'll catch you Monday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.